What is plagiarism? Plagiarism is a word that means kidnap, that's a Latin word. But in reality, plagiarism is to steal or pass off ideas or words of another as one's own, and that is how in scientific papers, plagiarism means if you have used verbatim somebody's taken sentences or paragraphs out of somebody's paper and then copied in your own manuscript, then it is plagiarism. If you have stolen somebody's idea as yours, that's also called plagiarism. Then how do I establish that the idea is not my original, or how do I establish that this particular sentence is not mine, somebody else's? That gives a little confusion about what is plagiarism and what can be passed off as not plagiarism. So therefore, let us spend the next 10-15 minutes really trying to understand what is plagiarism. It is very simple. I will just make it very simple. Plagiarism is fundamentally unethical. Plagiarism is almost like copyright infringement. If somebody has taken a copyright for a particular paper or particular book or particular music or particular or trademark, if he has applied for trademark for a logo or something, and if you use the same without the permission of the other person, it is copyright infringement and it is punishable in law. But when it comes to plagiarism, right, it is only copying portions of what that person has written. So is it punishable in law? It is not punishable in law, but it is unethical in scientific words. Say for example, there is a textbook. If you have copied portions of the textbook into your writing, whatever, your introduction or your thesis, then you plagiarized. If you have copied the entire textbook and then written it as your thesis, then it is a copyright violation. So therefore, plagiarism can lead at one particular point into copyright violation if you have really plagiarized and then put massive portions of plagiarized material into your manuscript. So you have to avoid that. There are different types of plagiarism. One is direct copying. You saw a nice paragraph and then you copied the paragraph, as it is, beginning to end. That is verbatim text copy. It's plagiarism. The second is indirect copying. So you decided, no, I'm not going to copy like this. I'm going to take a portion of this paragraph and I'll take another manuscript or another journal or another book and then another portion of the paragraph, the same paragraph describing similar this thing. So one or two sentences from this paragraph and one or two sentences from that paragraph I'll put and then I will mix them up. So it is like mosaic, such that nobody can detect, but it would still come under plagiarism. I have obtained this information from internet. It is published or it is shown as a HTML file. There's nice text there. I took it and then I copy pasted that. That's also plagiarism. It's called cyber plagiarism. These figures have already been available in images under Google search. So I took that image and then put it as my own in my manuscript. It is plagiarism. Finally, one more point where scientists really start wondering, is it plagiarism? I have published a manuscript, a paper in a journal, and after 6 months I am writing another one. And I am supposed to be writing a similar introduction. So why don't I take that introduction from whatever I have already published and then put verbatim in this manuscript, in this new publication? Is that plagiarism? In fact, that is plagiarism, But the author says that, no, that is whatever I have written. That is my own writing. I copied it in my own paper, But people have to realize that, the authors have to realize that it's already published. So you cannot reproduce that. It's already published and then it is a part of a copyright of a journal. And you are writing another paper. What is the purpose of this paper if you are bringing information that's already published and putting the same in this paper? So there are different ways of arguing here. In reality, once it is published, the same word should not be used even if it is your own paper. Okay, that is referred to as self-plagiarism because it falls under the definition of plagiarism. Why people plagiarize? Now, there are several reasons why people plagiarize. Firstly, many students plagiarize because they are ignorant. They do not know that copying from a textbook or a published paper as it is sentences is wrong. Okay, so that can be pardoned, but they must learn to write in their own words but not copy. But plagiarism remains as plagiarism whether you do it with ignorance or not. Why do people resort to plagiarism? It's because they lack writing skills. They don't know how to write a sentence. So they read somewhere and then the sentence looks so good. So why don't I write the same sentence? It is very simple logic, right? But using the same logic, if you start writing by writing other people's sentences and making them your own, then you have not developed your writing skills. So this is the point. So it is detrimental to your writing skills because you are showing your writing skills as somebody else's writing skills. That is plagiarism. Some people know that copying is wrong, but they don't consider that they don't know that it is scientifically unethical behavior. So therefore they do it. Some people do it intentionally. Oh, let me copy that. Who knows? Who will find out? I won't get caught. Who can really figure out that this particular paragraph has come from that manuscript? That's absolutely wrong. Finally, why the plagiarism is because it's faster way of writing. You can open 5 or 6 textbooks in front of you or 5 or 6 already published papers in front of you and then start copying one paragraph from each of them. Then you already, by the time you completed, you have 5 pages of your own writing. What you call it your own writing, but by copying and pasting, copy pasting or copying from other authors. So this is all plagiarism. Now, how to avoid plagiarism? There is another misconception here. The misconception is simply that if I have quoted somebody's work, so often people ask question, okay, I have taken a paragraph or 3 sentences from a manuscript and I have given the reference of that author. So I cited. How can this be plagiarism? I think if you have cited, then you are honest that this particular few sentences are from that author or from that manuscript. The citation is good. But here the citation is used wrongly. Citation is not to exactly reproduce the words from a manuscript and give them citation. If you are exactly using the same words of an author from his manuscript, it should be really written as cited, as stated by the author reference you give and put his words, sentences in quote and within quotation marks. What it means when you put within quotation marks something in your manuscript and give a reference means that you have actually not written your words, but you have written their words, So if you have done that way, if you have 20 or 30 references and from each reference you have 1 paragraph or half a paragraph verbatim reproduced, then your entire writing would have only quote unquote marks. Then for that means the originality content of your manuscript is so low because all the portions within the quote unquote marks are actually somebody else's words, So that is also plagiarism. Then a plagiarism checking software which many universities abroad use, saying that if you write a research paper or if you write a research report or if you write your thesis, they would like to see what is the originality content in that. And they say some 10 to 15% of plagiarism or lack of originality can be accepted. The 10 to 20% or 10 to 15%, where does it come from? Because there are certain sentences in literature that we use and we cannot construct the sentence in a different way, It is something like a definition of a particular, process. And the definition as defined, if it's 1 or 2 sentences of definition, everybody would use the same sentence. So that becomes identical, but it's not plagiarized material. If you write your references and the reference titles, usually reference title is the title of the manuscript. So that is already in literature. So if reference titles are put in plagiarism software, it shows that it is plagiarized because they appeared several times before in the searches. So some of those things would constitute that lack of originality. So therefore 10 to 15% of lack of originality is accepted. But beyond that means there is a deliberate plagiarism. So therefore, you should not use other people's sentences verbatim. Then the question comes is, what is meant by citation? Citation is actually you read a manuscript and you understood something that that person has reported in his finding. So let us say a particular authors are reporting the development, successful development of a drug retarding films or rapid or mouth dissolved tablets. What you write is that so and so authors have reported the formation or successful development of mouth rapid dissolution tablets, aerosol tablets, using 5% of HPMC plus something else, and you give them the citation. Nowhere in their manuscript they have actually written the sentence, but their actual manuscript bottom message is that they were successfully prepared these rapid dissolving tablets using a combination of this excipient, that excipient. That is what you have obtained after reading, but after reading their paper. So you write that here in your own sentences and give a citation of that reference. This is the true way of how to cite references in your manuscripts. How do we find plagiarism? I have several examples. How do I come across plagiarism? I have my own example. It's simple. When I went abroad to do my graduate studies, my first report, the professor returned and said that you plagiarized. I said, what did I do? Then the professor has taken time to explain to me, saying that you copied from a book. I said, yes, I did, because I did not know that was wrong. I said, yes, in these parts of the world, it is wrong. You cannot copy from a book. You should read and reproduce what you have written in your own words, Then I said, give me a chance, I will rewrite. I have rewritten, changing many sentences in different ways and then trying to explain. The professor said, actually you paraphrased. You took the same sentences, you turned them around this way, that way and then wrote, but it still comes under plagiarism only. But I will now accept your report because of the effort you have put in. Try to put the same effort by reading something, understanding something and writing it in your own words. That is how I understood what is meant by plagiarism, and guided by that professor started to write on my own without really copying verbatim from manuscripts. This has happened several years ago. So like that, everywhere, for all of you, there would be a learning at one particular point that you get out of plagiarism and start writing your own, then you don't be plagiarizing anymore, As an examples from a journal perspective, I have seen, people writing portions of a research papers, copying and putting it in their own. We have caught such ones and rejected the papers. I have seen a thesis. I was reading the introduction of the thesis, a PhD thesis submitted. It has come to me as an examiner for evaluation. While reading the introduction, I suddenly started seeing the student who is writing doesn't have a good grasp of English. So there are several simple, sentence syntax errors, sentence construction errors. Suddenly I started seeing beautiful language. Great expressions. Sometimes those expressions you read and you say that, wow, what kind of a writing this author has done. I started to wonder why this student, from making very simple, silly mistakes in sentences in the beginning, has matured into writing such beautiful sentences on the third page or fourth page of the introduction. Then I just took that and, actually this is a physical copy of the thesis. So I copied and I typed that paragraph, part of that paragraph, into a plagiarism software, and it pulled me a review article, a book chapter, in which the next 10 pages of this particular thesis are nothing but paragraph after paragraph from the book chapter. So it's a plagiarized thesis, right? You can't write such deliberate plagiarism in thesis, So this is another example of how we can catch it. Once one review, I sent a manuscript for review. The reviewer sent me back 6 different manuscripts, 6 different published papers published by that reviewer, highlighting exactly the portions of paragraphs that are actually copied by the author in his manuscript. I looked at that and surprised. If I have sent it to some other reviewer, he would not have observed. It so coincidentally went to the reviewer whose papers were plagiarized in this particular manuscript. See that? So from then onwards, we started realizing that in manuscript submission in journals, there is rampant plagiarism. So we started putting um, greater leash, greater vigilance on catching plagiarized papers. How do you do that? There are some free softwares in available in the internet, where some softwares take one sentence or two sentences and start showing similarity searches. Several publications where the same sentence or a similar sentence has produced. Then you go back to that paper to see, are there more sentences similar to that in this manuscript, and that comparisons gives rise to identifying plagiarism. So for good scientific writing students, it is necessary that you should avoid plagiarism. To avoid plagiarism, it's not the editors and it is not the journal managers' responsibility. It is the responsibility of the authors. Journals take steps and authors ensure that they don't plagiarize. Colleges must promote good writing skills. They must give awards for good writing skills. They must clearly indicate, the colleges, academic institutions should have a policy saying that every thesis submitted by a student will be put through a plagiarism check, and if it's found to be plagiarized, it will be rejected. Abroad, universities outside in North America, they do that. I think Indian schools also should do that in order to encourage students to write original and in order to curb plagiarism. Now, my suggestions would be, do not use someone's words without referencing the source. Use quotation marks and indents to show that they are not yours. Try to write, always try to write your own sentences. Even if you are putting quotes, then limit it to very short sentences as quotes. Do not use somebody's ideas, and without citing them, without referring them, without acknowledging them as your own ideas. These are some of the basics that you need to follow in order to avoid plagiarism. So I wish you all the best with your scientific writing, and good scientific writing without plagiarism, and all the best. Thank you very much.